Once upon a time, in a very large and bustling city, there lived a woman named Amra. Everyone who knew her described her as warm-hearted and full of life. She had countless friends who loved visiting her home. Each time they came over, they somehow ended up falling asleep on her couch, often for hours. People said it was because her house was so cozy and peaceful that it made them relax completely. But what no one knew was that there was a dark secret behind Amra's charm. To everyone around her, Amra was cheerful, playful, and the center of every gathering. Her laughter could light up a room, and people couldn't help but adore her. Yet, behind that laughter hid something mysterious and dangerous. Every visitor who fell asleep on her couch unknowingly became part of her secret. While they slept, Amra would stand over them, whispering strange words in a language no one could understand. When they woke up, they always felt weak and drained but thought nothing of it. They believed the comfort of her home had simply made them drowsy. What they didn't realize was that Amra was marking them, placing a tiny tattoo somewhere hidden on their bodies. For some, it was on their back, for others, it was in places no one would ever notice, like inside their nostrils. The mark was shaped like a snake, a mystical creature that allowed Amra to take control of their bodies slowly. The weakness they felt wasn't from rest, it was the snake feeding on their strength. The people she marked thought they were still living freely, making their own choices. But, in truth, they were puppets, controlled by invisible strings tied to Amra's hands. Each new mark made her stronger, her power spreading deeper into the city. She began influencing powerful people, leaders, businessmen, and anyone with authority, using the snake's magic to bend their wills to hers. But no one suspected Amra. To them, she remained the life of every party, the woman with a heart of gold. Her laughter still filled the air, but it was no longer laughter, it was the hiss of the serpent feeding from within their souls. One rainy evening, Amra met a man named Jason. He was handsome, successful, and had a kind smile that could soften even the hardest heart. Amra was stranded in the rain, pretending to need help, when Jason stopped his car and offered her a ride. He had no idea who she really was. To him, she was just a grateful stranger caught in a storm. Jason was happily married to his wife, Kimberly, and they had 2 lovely children. That night was their 7th wedding anniversary, and Jason had planned a special surprise for his wife. But fate had other plans. When they reached Amra's house, she suddenly began gasping, pretending to have an asthma attack. Jason quickly found her inhaler and helped her inside. What he didn't know was that the moment he stepped into her home, his life would change forever. Amra thanked him sweetly and urged him to rest a bit before leaving. "You look tired," she said softly. Jason shook his head. "No, my wife is waiting. It's our anniversary tonight," he replied. But before he could stand, his body grew heavy, and his vision blurred. Within minutes, he was asleep on her couch, just like all the others. Amra stood over him with a wicked smile and whispered her ancient words. The snake mark appeared on his back and sank into his skin. When Jason woke up, he felt strange, like something inside him had shifted. He apologized for dozing off, blaming it on exhaustion, and hurried home. At home, Kimberly was waiting, dressed beautifully for their anniversary dinner. Tears filled her eyes as she saw Jason walk in hours late. She had called him more than 10 times, but he never answered. Instead of explaining or apologizing, Jason brushed past her coldly and went straight to bed. When she tried to speak, he snapped, "What's the point of celebrating when all you do is nag?" Kimberly stood frozen. Jason had never spoken to her that way. In 7 years of marriage, he had never raised his voice or dismissed her feelings. That night marked the beginning of a terrible change. Days turned into weeks, and Jason became a different man. The loving husband who once adored his wife now ignored her completely. The caring father who played with his children now shouted at them for the smallest mistakes. He stayed out late, sometimes not returning home at all. The laughter in their home disappeared, replaced by silence and fear. Even the children stopped calling him Daddy, too frightened by his temper. Jason's heart and soul now belonged to Amra. He spent more and more time at her house, drawn to her like a moth to flame. Each time he fell asleep on her couch, the serpent tightened its grip, twisting him further from the man he once was. Kimberly tried to talk to him, to understand what was happening, but he pushed her away. He accused her of being the problem, saying cruel things that shattered her spirit. He locked his phone, stopped giving her money, and missed important moments, birthdays, anniversaries, even when their son was sick. When Kimberly begged him to care, he coldly replied, "He's not dead." "What's the fuss about?" Neighbors began whispering. They noticed Jason's constant visits to Amra's house and his coldness toward his family. Rumors spread that Kimberly was a bad wife who had driven her husband away. She couldn't defend herself, how could she explain something even she didn't understand? At night, Kimberly cried herself to sleep, holding her children close. Their once happy home had become a place of fear. Whenever Jason's footsteps echoed at the door, their hearts raced, not with joy, but with dread. One evening, desperate to save her family, Kimberly confronted Jason. "What happened to you? This isn't the man I married," she cried. Jason looked at her, his eyes dark and distant. "Maybe this is who I've always been," he said coldly. His words broke her heart. Later that night, around 10 p.m., Jason grabbed his car keys and drove off. Kimberly, filled with suspicion and fear, followed him quietly. When she saw him enter Amra's house and embrace her, her heart shattered. Her husband, the man who once swore eternal love, was holding another woman in his arms. She returned home in tears, broken beyond words. The next morning, when Jason came back, Kimberly stood by the door. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, but her voice was calm. "I saw you with her," she said. "Tell me the truth, what's going on?" Jason looked at her without emotion. "I don't need to hide it anymore. I love Amra. She makes me feel alive. I don't love you." Those words hit Kimberly like a thunderbolt. "Jason, we have children," she pleaded. "We have a family." But Jason walked past her as though she didn't exist. Heartbroken and desperate, Kimberly went to Amra's house. When Amra opened the door, she looked radiant, smiling cruelly as Kimberly begged, "Please, leave my husband alone. I don't know what you've done, but my children need their father." Amra laughed. "You dare come here and tell me what to do? Jason is mine now," she said, her voice cold. Then her eyes turned dark as she raised her hand. "If you ever interfere again, you'll regret it." Terrified, Kimberly fled. That night, her young son David whispered something that froze her blood. "Mommy, Daddy is a snake," he said. When she scolded him, he added, "I saw it." A big snake was wrapped around him while he was sleeping. Kimberly was horrified. That night, she dreamt of a giant snake crawling out of Jason's back, controlling him like a puppet. She woke up trembling and began to pray. But when Jason heard her prayers, he stormed into the room, furious. "Get out of my house," he yelled, pushing her and the children out into the night. Homeless and terrified, Kimberly took her children to their church. The pastor offered them a small room to sleep in. Though broken, Kimberly continued to pray for deliverance. The next morning, she returned home to confront Amra once more. This time, Amra's tone changed. She revealed her true identity. "I am the daughter of the man whose home you destroyed," she said bitterly. "The man you called at midnight, the night he died. Because of you, my mother became a widow, and I became an orphan. My pain brought me to the water spirits, who gave me the serpent's power for revenge." Kimberly was speechless, trembling. Then she said softly, "It wasn't me. It was my twin sister, Kira. She was reckless and wild. People often mistook us for each other. I've carried her shame my entire life." Amra froze. "Lies," she screamed. But Kimberly lifted her hands and prayed aloud, calling on God for mercy and deliverance. The room shook, the wind roared, and lightning flashed. Fire came down, consuming the serpent that had bound so many souls. Amra screamed as the dark spirit left her body, leaving her powerless. Jason fell to the ground, trembling as the mark on his back burned red, then disappeared. When he opened his eyes, tears filled them. "Kimberly," he whispered, "what have I done?" Kimberly hugged him tightly. "It wasn't you. You were a prisoner, but now you're free." Their children ran to them, crying, and their home was filled once again with love and peace. Amra lay on the floor, broken and weak. Her beauty faded, her laughter gone. Kimberly knelt beside her and said gently, "Amra, let go of your anger. Revenge has only destroyed you." Tears rolled down Amra's face. "All these years, I thought hurting others would heal me. But I only became what I hated." She took Kimberly's hand, weeping. In that moment, she finally found peace. From that day, Amra disappeared from their lives. Kimberly and Jason rebuilt their home, stronger than ever. The story reminds us that every action has consequences. Kimberly carried shame she didn't deserve but chose prayer and forgiveness. Amra chose hatred and revenge, and it consumed her. The lesson is clear. When we seek revenge, we destroy ourselves. But when we choose mercy, truth, and love, even the deepest chains can be broken. The city moved on the way cities do, busy streets humming, buses sighing at stops, markets setting out their early fruit, yet for the families touched by Amra's serpent, time did not move so quickly. Healing rarely arrives like lightning. It comes the old way, a little each morning, with coffee in a quiet kitchen, or with a hand that doesn't pull away when sorrow speaks. Kimberly learned this first. After the night of deliverance, she slept without fear for the first time in months. Still, when dawn came, she woke with a start, expecting a shout, a slammed door, a cold silence. But the house held only ordinary sounds, water running through the pipes, a child turning over in bed, a bird tapping at the window. She sat up, pressed her palms together, and whispered a simple prayer of thanks. Not a loud victory song, only gratitude for breath, for peace, for another chance. Jason was the one who struggled with mornings. He could not meet his own eyes in the mirror. He shaved carefully, as if a wrong move might open a flood he could not stop. While the serpent's mark was gone, the memories were not. He remembered the cruel words, the slammed phone, the anniversaries left to wither. He remembered the faces of his children when he walked past them as if they were strangers. The guilt pressed on his chest like a stone. In the first week, he tried to fix everything at once. He bought flowers, cooked breakfast, cleaned the closets, and replaced a broken fence panel in the yard. He spoke softly, sometimes too softly, as if afraid his voice might hurt someone. Kimberly watched him with careful eyes. She did not want gifts or spotless shelves. She wanted steadiness. So she told him the truth, in the gentlest way. "It will take time," she said, touching his hand. "But I am staying. We will walk it together." The children needed more than promises. Their daughter studied him, suspicious and hopeful at the same time. Their son, David, kept close to Kimberly for a while. He slept with the light on and woke from dreams he could not explain. Jason sat on the edge of his bed one afternoon and asked, quietly, if they could start over. David shrugged and turned his face to the wall. It took a few days, and then a few more. One evening, father and son built a lopsided paper airplane and flew it across the hallway. It hit the door, fell, and both of them laughed. The sound surprised them. It sounded like a door opening. Neighbors, too, needed a new story to tell. Some had gossiped while Jason drifted from his home. Now they saw him on the porch, repairing a loose step, his eyes steady, his voice respectful. They saw Kimberly watering plants, greeting them as she always had. Little by little, the whispers changed. People tend to forgive faster when they can point to something practical, like a mended porch or a fixed fence. But forgiveness built on wood and nails is thin. The true work happened indoors, around the table, between slow breaths and patient words. Kimberly called the pastor and asked if there were other families who had suffered under the serpent's hold. There were many. Some were ready to talk, others were not. The church set aside a quiet room on Tuesday evenings. They made tea, put a box of tissues on the table, and promised that no one had to speak until they were ready. The group began with 3 people. Then 5. Then more. They did not trade dramatic testimonies or compete in sorrow. They shared small things, a day without panic, a night of good sleep, the first phone call to a mother after months of silence. They sat together without trying to fix each other. The room learned a rhythm: listen, nod, breathe, pray. It was enough. As for Amra, the night the serpent left her was the night her story broke open. When the power drained from her, she faced the truth she had carried like a hot coal: revenge had given her motion, not direction. In those first days, she kept to herself. Her house, once filled with the heavy sweet scent that fooled visitors into sleep, smelled instead of plain soap and open windows. She washed the walls. She opened drawers and threw away the little tools of her darkness. She did not know what to do with the silence that remained, so she sat in it. On a quiet afternoon, she walked to the water, the same place where she once begged for the serpent's strength. The river remembered what she had asked for and what it had cost. She stood there, shoes sinking a little into the mud, and spoke to the water, not to ask for power, but to return what did not belong to her. "I am done," she said. "I will not be a weapon anymore." The wind lifted and fell. The reeds whispered. Nothing magical happened that anyone could see, but something ordinary and holy took root: the choice to live. A week later, Amra wrote a letter. She did not try to excuse herself. She did not make her pain larger than the pain she had caused. She told the truth: how grief had eaten her like fire, how bitterness had sharpened her, how she let anger define her days. She asked no one to forget. She asked only for the chance to repair what could be repaired. She delivered the letter to the church. The pastor read it slowly, then placed it on the table at the Tuesday meeting. No one rushed to reply. They let time do what time does when it is treated kindly. Kimberly read the letter twice. The first time, her hands trembled. The second time, her breath steadied. She did not feel friendship rise in her. Forgiveness is not friendship, and it is not blindness. It is the decision to open your fist and let the stone fall, even if you still feel the bruise. She told Jason that she wanted to meet Amra, not to revisit old wounds, but to set down what was left to set down. He agreed, and they chose a public garden with a wooden bench beneath a jacaranda tree. When Amra arrived, she looked smaller somehow, but not diminished, more like someone who had stepped out of a battle and laid down her weapons. They sat. No one hurried to speak. Birds moved in the branches and purple petals drifted onto the path. Finally, Amra said, "I cannot give you back the months I took." Kimberly nodded. "No," she said. "But you can give the next ones to the right things." They talked for a while, not about details that could never be balanced, but about what comes next when the past cannot be changed. They made a plan that was not grand enough for headlines, but strong enough to carry weight. Amra would sell the house that had been a trap and use the money to support a small center for families in crisis, nothing fancy, just a place for counsel, for practical help, for a safe nap when the world has taken your sleep. The church agreed to sponsor the effort. Jason offered to handle the accounting. Trust, once broken, needs doors and windows wide open. The children visited the center once it opened. There were shelves with board games, a corner with books, and a quiet room with 2 soft chairs. David found a blue kite in a donation box and asked if he could keep it. Of course, Amra said, smiling in a way that held no secrets. Later, on a windy afternoon, they flew the kite in the park. It pulled against the string as if it wanted to break free, and David laughed, not because it might escape, but because he had the strength to hold it steady. In the months that followed, the center became a place where ordinary mercies were kept. A mother came when her husband's temper frightened her. She left with a plan, a list of numbers to call, and the knowledge that she was not alone. An older man, living by himself and growing too quiet, came for the conversation and stayed to read stories to the children on Thursdays. A teenager who had been skipping school found a tutor who did not shame him for falling behind. These were not miracles with bright lights, they were the kind of miracles that look like people showing up on time and staying to wash the cups. Kimberly returned to work part-time and discovered that her steadiness had deepened. She had less fear of small storms. She learned to say yes and no with less apology. On quiet evenings, she and Jason walked around the block, sometimes talking, sometimes not. He made changes that were visible and dull, the best kind. He set reminders to leave work on time. He put his phone in a drawer during dinner. He apologized without adding reasons to the end of his sentence. He did not insist that the past be forgotten, he asked that the present be cared for. It was enough. On the anniversary that came next, they kept the plan simple. No restaurant. No long speeches. They made soup, set the table, and invited the pastor and his wife, who brought warm bread wrapped in a towel. After they ate, Jason stood and told the children what the day meant. He did not compare it to the one that had been lost. He honored it on its own terms, a day they had reached together. Later, they looked through old photographs. There they all were, younger and tired and hopeful, the way families always are. Kimberly smiled at a picture of the children with ice cream smeared on their chins. "We were learning even then," she said. "We still are." As for Amra, she kept walking by the water now and then, not to bargain, but to remember who she had chosen to become. She found work that used the best parts of her quick mind, her way with people, the laughter that no longer hissed. Sometimes she sat across from a woman with a broken voice and said, "You do not have to carry all of this today." Sometimes she sat across from a man full of shame and said, "You can tell the truth and still belong." She did not preach. She did not promise. She simply stayed in the room, and that was often more than enough. There were still hard days. The city did not turn kind overnight. Bills still came. Tempers still heated. Memories still rose at odd times, like smoke from a field long after the fire has gone out. But they had built a kind of net between them, family, church, neighbors, the small center with 2 soft chairs, and when someone slipped, the net held. One afternoon, David asked his mother if snakes were always bad. Kimberly thought for a moment. "No," she said. "They are what they are. But what matters is who holds the power and what they do with it." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his homework. Later, he drew a picture for the center's bulletin board, a snake shedding its skin and, beside it, a person setting down a heavy bag. The title he wrote in careful letters was simple: Change. The city kept moving, as cities will. New families arrived, others moved away. The bus still sighed at the corner stop. Markets still set out fruit in the mornings. But for those who had lived through the long dark and the bright deliverance, the streets looked different. Not safer, exactly. Not gentler. Just more honest. They had learned that harm grows in secrecy and heals in the open. They had learned that love is not a feeling but a set of choices, made again and again, sometimes with shaky hands, sometimes with steady ones. And so they kept choosing. Kimberly chose to trust the day in front of her. Jason chose to be a husband and a father with his time, not his speeches. Amra chose to be a builder, not an avenger. The pastor chose to keep the room open on Tuesdays, kettle on, chairs ready. The children chose to laugh freely and to call for help when they needed it. The net held, and because it held, those who walked after them found it easier to place their feet. If anyone asked for a lesson, they kept it plain. Pain is real. So is mercy. Power can wound. It can also repair. What we feed grows. What we release lightens. Most of all, they had learned that the deepest chains do not fall with noise. They fall with the simple courage to say, "I was wrong," or "I forgive you," or "I will try again tomorrow." And when those words are spoken, even the oldest houses can become homes again.